Everyone thought I was paranoid because I was accusing my girlfriend and best friend of cheating on me. But was I really paranoid? I've always believed that betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it rearranges who you are. You see yourself differently afterward, like a stranger in your own life. That realization hit me the night my sister, Danielle, called and shattered the illusion I'd been living for the past decade. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Jared was my best friend before I even knew what friendship really meant. He was the loud, charismatic one, the guy who always made people laugh and knew how to take up space in the best way. Claire, on the other hand, was my quiet, steady rock. We met in high school, a cliché romance that somehow held strong through college and into our adult lives. By all accounts, I should have been the happiest guy in the world. New city, new job, a beautiful girlfriend by my side, and my best friend always nearby. Jared was practically family, showing up for barbecues and game nights like he was part of the household. And Claire? She was my forever. Or so I thought. It started with small things, the kind of details you brush off because you trust the people around you. Jared's lingering glances at Claire, the inside jokes I wasn't a part of, the way they'd hang back together at group outings while I grabbed the next round. It was all so subtle, so quiet, that I didn't see it for what it was. Not until Danielle called me that night. Her voice was shaking when I picked up. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you," she started, "but I can't keep this to myself anymore. Jared and Claire. They're not who you think they are." For a moment I thought I misheard her. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my chest tightening. "They've been seeing each other," she said, blunt and to the point. "I saw them together last weekend. It wasn't a misunderstanding, and it wasn't innocent." I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "That's ridiculous. Jared's my best friend. Claire wouldn't do that to me." "I wish I was wrong," she said softly. "But I'm not." I hung up on her. Not out of anger, but out of denial. The world I had built, the people I trusted most, couldn't have been lying to me this whole time. It didn't make sense. But the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't care about logic. It doesn't care about what makes sense. It just is. And the truth? The truth was waiting for me, whether I wanted to face it or not. I sat at the kitchen table, Claire's phone in my hand. She was still asleep, her soft breathing audible from the other room. Danielle's words echoed in my mind, and I hated that I couldn't just shake them off. "You're being paranoid," I muttered, trying to convince myself. But doubt has a way of burrowing in, no matter how much you try to ignore it. I unlocked the phone. She'd given me the code months ago when we were searching for something together. At the time, it felt like a sign of trust. Now, it felt like the only way to prove Danielle wrong. I scrolled through her messages, expecting, or maybe hoping, to find something. But the conversations were mundane. Exchanges with her coworkers about deadlines. A group chat with friends planning an upcoming girls' night. A few jokes with Jared that were so ordinary they felt like they'd been ripped from a sitcom. Nothing. I checked her photos, her emails, even her browser history. Still nothing. The evidence I thought I'd find wasn't there. I put the phone back where I'd found it and sat in silence, my chest tight. Danielle had to be wrong. Maybe she'd seen something out of context, or maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Jared and Claire were both important parts of my life. Why would either of them do something like this? But even as I tried to convince myself, the knot in my stomach wouldn't untangle. Claire walked into the kitchen, her hair messy from sleep and wearing one of my old t-shirts. She smiled when she saw me and kissed the top of my head. "You're up early," she said. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." She nodded and turned to make coffee, her movements calm and easy. There wasn't a hint of guilt or tension in her demeanor. If she was hiding something, she was doing a damn good job of it. But that was the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always show on the surface. I couldn't let it rest. Danielle's voice lingered in my head like an echo, and every time I saw Claire and Jared together, even briefly, I couldn't stop replaying her words. If she was wrong, I needed to know. If she was right, I didn't know what I'd do. So I called her. "We need to talk," I said. Danielle didn't hesitate. "I figured you'd want to meet. Coffee tomorrow?" We met at a little diner just outside of town, one of those places where the smell of frying bacon sticks to your clothes long after you've left. Danielle was already there when I arrived, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands. She looked tense, her usually confident demeanor shadowed by uncertainty. I slid into the booth across from her. "All right," I said. "Tell me everything." She set the mug down and took a deep breath. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Ryan. You know that, right?" But I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I saw them together. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I started noticing the way they look at each other when you're not around. "What exactly did you see?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Last weekend," she said, her voice trembling. "I went to that little bar near Jared's place. I was meeting a friend, but I saw Claire and Jared there. Together. It wasn't just friendly, Ryan. The way they were sitting, how close they were, it wasn't right. And when they left, they didn't even look around. They just walked out together like they didn't care who saw them." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "That doesn't prove anything," I said, more to convince myself than her. "They're close because of me." "Maybe you misread it." Danielle's jaw tightened. I thought the same thing. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then I saw the texts. My stomach churned. "What texts?" I didn't mean to see them," she said quickly. "Jared was showing me something on his phone, and when he handed it to me, a message popped up from Claire. It said, 'I can't wait to see you again.'" I froze, my mind reeling. That could mean anything, I said, though the words felt hollow even as they left my mouth. Danielle reached across the table, her voice soft but firm. "Ryan, you know me? I wouldn't bring this to you unless I was sure. I've been watching them for weeks. The way Jared talks about her when you're not around, the way Claire lights up when he's in the room, it's not nothing. I wish it was, but it's not." I leaned back, the cheap vinyl of the booth squeaking under me. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Danielle didn't flinch. "Find out the truth. You deserve to know, Ryan. Even if it hurts." Danielle's words echoed in my head all the way home. Find out the truth. Easier said than done. What was I supposed to do, set a trap? Confront Jared and Claire without proof? No matter what option I considered, none of it felt like me. I wasn't the type to play detective in my own life, but I also wasn't the type to let something this big go unchallenged. Claire was already home when I walked through the door, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her laptop perched on her knees. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that used to feel like a warm light in the middle of a storm. Tonight, it felt like a question I couldn't answer. "You're late," she said. "Ran into Danielle?" I replied, shrugging off my coat. Her expression didn't change, but there was a flicker, barely there, in her eyes. "Oh? Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Just catching up." She nodded and turned her attention back to her laptop, but I noticed how stiff her shoulders had gotten. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that I was reading into things because Danielle had gotten into my head. Still, I couldn't let it go. The next day, I called Jared. "Hey, man," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Feel like grabbing a drink tonight?" "Of course," he said, his voice as easygoing as ever. "Where and when?" We met at our usual spot, a dive bar with sticky floors and the best wings in town. Jared was already at the bar when I arrived, waving me over with a grin. "What's the occasion?" he asked as I slid onto the stool next to him. "No occasion," I said, ordering a beer. "Just thought it had been a while since it was just us." Jared chuckled. "Yeah, Claire always seems to tag along these days. Not that I'm complaining." I froze for half a second before taking a sip of my beer to cover it. "You two get along pretty well, huh?" "Of course," he said, laughing. "She's great. You're a lucky guy." There it was again, that flicker of something I couldn't put my finger on. I decided to push a little further. "You ever feel like Claire's, I don't know, too good for me?" I asked, pretending to be half joking. Jared smirked. "Don't sell yourself short, man. You're a catch." I watched him carefully, searching for any sign of guilt or discomfort, but he was as unreadable as ever. It was maddening. The conversation drifted to sports, work, and old memories, but my mind stayed locked on the unspoken question hanging between us. If Jared was hiding something, he wasn't letting it slip tonight. As we parted ways, he clapped me on the back, grinning like the same best friend I'd known since middle school. "Let's do this again soon," he said. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Soon." But as I watched him walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. For days, Danielle's words replayed in my mind. I had scoured Claire's phone and watched Jared like a hawk, but there was no proof, nothing solid. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It felt like every laugh they shared, every glance they exchanged, was loaded with a meaning I couldn't understand. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe Danielle's warning had infected me, turning normal moments into evidence of betrayal. Or maybe I wasn't imagining it at all. That night, I decided I couldn't live in limbo any longer. Claire was in the kitchen making tea, humming softly to herself. She looked so innocent, so normal, that I almost backed out. Almost. "Claire," I said, leaning against the counter. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. She turned, holding 2 mugs. "What's up?" "I need to ask you something," I said, and the seriousness in my tone made her pause. "Okay," she said cautiously, setting the mugs down. "What is it?" I hesitated, but there was no turning back now. "Are you seeing someone else?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment she just stared at me. Then she laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "What? Ryan, where is this coming from? Just answer me," I said, my voice tightening. "No," she said firmly, crossing her arms. "I'm not. Why would you even think that?" "Danielle," I admitted. "She said she saw you with Jared. She thinks something's going on between you two." Claire's face hardened. "Danielle? Seriously? Ryan, your sister has always been dramatic. I can't believe you're listening to her. She's not like that," I said, but even to me, the words felt weak. Claire sighed, shaking her head. "Jared and I are friends. That's it. We hang out sometimes because he's your best friend, and I thought it was important to get along with him. But now you're accusing me of what? Cheating on you? With him?" I looked down, unsure of what to say. The logical part of me told me she was right, that Danielle could have been mistaken, that I was letting paranoia cloud my judgment. But the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. "I'm sorry," I muttered. I had to ask." Claire stepped closer, her tone softening. "Ryan, I love you. You have to trust me. Jared is your best friend, and I would never do anything to hurt you. You know that, right?" I nodded, though my doubts lingered. She cupped my face in her hands, forcing me to look at her. "Please don't let this ruin us. Whatever Danielle thinks she saw, she's wrong. Okay?" "Okay," I said, though the word felt hollow in my mouth. She kissed me, her touch tender and reassuring, and for a moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I was just being paranoid, that my world wasn't about to collapse. Claire's assurances put all thoughts of possible betrayal to rest, and at last, I was at peace. For the first time in weeks, I felt like things were back to normal. Claire seemed more relaxed, our conversations were lighter, and I started to wonder if I'd let paranoia get the better of me. One evening, Claire mentioned she'd been invited out by her friend Emma. "We haven't caught up in forever," she said, pulling on her coat. "It'll be nice to have a girls' night." "Sounds great," I said, smiling. "Tell her I said hi." She leaned in to kiss me. "Don't wait up, okay?" As the door closed behind her, I wandered into the living room, flipping through the channels aimlessly. The silence felt heavier than usual, and after about an hour, I decided I didn't want to spend the evening alone. Grabbing my keys, I headed out. On the way, I picked up a 6-pack of beer, Jared's favorite. It was his day off, and I knew he'd be home. Surprising him felt like the perfect way to kill the growing boredom. By the time I pulled up to Jared's apartment, it was already dark. His car was parked outside, as expected. I climbed the stairs to his door, balancing the beer in one hand while knocking with the other. "Yo, Jared!" I called out, grinning. "Guess who brought refreshments?" There was no immediate answer, but I thought I heard muffled voices inside. I knocked again, louder this time. Come on, man, don't tell me you're ignoring me! The door creaked open slightly, but instead of Jared's familiar grin, I was met with silence. The apartment was dimly lit, and something about the stillness inside set my nerves on edge. Jared? I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The voices I'd heard earlier were gone, replaced by the low hum of the TV in the background. I made my way toward the living room, the six-pack dangling from my fingers, and that's when I saw them, Jared and Claire. Together. They froze when they saw me, their faces a mix of shock and guilt. Claire was standing too close to him, her hand resting on his arm. Jared, who never looked uncomfortable in his life, suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The beers slipped from my hand, the bottles clinking loudly against the floor. Either of them spoke. They didn't need to. The truth hit me like a freight train, stealing the breath from my lungs. I stood there, staring at the two people I trusted most in the world, the betrayal settling in like a cold weight in my chest. Ryan! Claire started, her voice barely a whisper. But I didn't wait to hear the rest. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I turned and walked out of the apartment without a word, the sound of Claire calling my name echoing faintly behind me. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it didn't snap me out of the daze. My mind was a blur of emotions, anger, betrayal, disbelief. The two people I had trusted most had just ripped my life apart in the space of a single evening. I drove without thinking, the city lights blurring past. I ended up at Danielle's place. She answered the door in her pajamas, her eyes wide with concern. Ryan? What's going on? They're together, I said, my voice flat. Her face fell. Oh, Ryan! I'm so sorry. She pulled me into the living room, but I barely registered her words. She was saying something about how I didn't deserve this, how I was better off without them, but all I could do was sit on her couch and stare at the wall. The next morning, Claire called. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. Then the text started. Ryan, please let me explain. It wasn't what it looked like. We need to talk. I deleted them all without reading past the first line. Jared, predictably, didn't bother reaching out. He probably knew there was no salvaging what we had. In the days that followed, I packed up my things and left the apartment I'd shared with Claire. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't even leave a note. Let her figure it out when she came home to an empty space. Danielle helped me find a new place, and little by little, I started putting myself back together. The pain didn't go away overnight. There were days when it felt like it never would. But each time I saw Claire's name flash on my phone and ignored it, each time I thought about Jared and didn't feel the urge to punch a wall, I knew I was healing. Some betrayals are too big to forgive. And some people don't deserve your forgiveness.